need a scorecard right now trying to follow Washington, don't you?
The Dan York State of Mind program is brought to you in part by Lookout Rhode Island and Taco Comfort Solutions.
What's interesting is that the flurry of activity is coming from a very small group inside the White House. And it seems to me, just from watching everything and listening to everybody's thoughts on this, from Washington all the way up 95 toward our own home base, that the Trump administration, surprisingly, doesn't trust many folks that are holdovers from the Obama administration. And thus far, we see that in kind of their, holding on to the details of this, tiny little decision about barring people from 7 foreign countries into America, for 90 days, 120 days, whatever the details are. How are you? Nice to have you in. Thank you very much for tuning in. We have a professor from Brown who has a lot of thoughts on the immigration thing and understands it pretty well, and may not be too keen on what's happening in Washington. Look, I want to say this up front. You know that we are scratching everywhere in this community for folks who are going to be opining on the support side of Donald Trump's activity. And I must tell you that it is a hard thing to find around here. So for those of you who think you have a perspective and have some dose of credibility about it, do not hesitate to contact us here at Dan York State of Mind to let us know that you're available. And of course, on the radio as well, on WPRL weekdays 3 till 6. I mean, I have been outward with you about not being a big fan of the Donald Trump campaign. He's our president. I want to give him an open-minded chance about all the things that he's doing, but I'm not inclined to support a lot of what's got going on. Then we bring guests in who just want to do a two-step on his Oval Office head, and that's their First Amendment right. I say this because sometimes it feels like the show is a little bit tilted, and it's not that by design. Okay? All right. Do you feel good about that, Lex? I got that off my chest. My producer's saying, yeah, thank you, because I'm on her all the time. Give me somebody who thinks Trump's okay. She's like, find him for me, or her. Let's go to the rundown. Just saying. And then you get this. Yes. Yeah. This is. She's a holdover. She's a holdover, and she looked at it and said, you know what, I just don't think this works. Do we have a second headline that goes along with that? And when she said it doesn't work, rather verbosely, Donald Trump couldn't take the hit without making it seem like she's almost anti-American. Here's the latest from CBS.
Senators in the Judiciary Committee are debating whether to move forward with Senator Jeff Sessions' nomination to be the next Attorney General.
He will follow the law.
If the full Senate approves, Sessions will take over a Department of Justice that has been shaken up after the late-night firing of Sally Yates, the acting head of the department. The White House claimed Yates, an Obama appointee, had betrayed the Department of Justice when she refused to enforce President Trump's travel ban for citizens from 7 countries. Yates said she was not convinced the executive order was lawful. Democrats say Sessions needs to be able to stand up to President Trump as well.
The Attorney General is the people's attorney, not the president's attorney.
Many people are still criticizing the president's temporary travel ban, and now State Department officials in mostly Muslim countries are expressing new concerns. American diplomats in Qatar, Sudan, the United Arab Emirates, and Indonesia have sent cables in the last 24 hours saying jihadists will use the ban as a propaganda tool. But the White House warned State Department personnel to support the president's decision.
And these career bureaucrats have a problem with it? I think that they should either get with the program or they can go.
Despite the warning, dozens of State Department diplomats signed a memo of dissent, arguing the ban runs counter to American values.
You know what runs counter to American tradition and actually constitutional balance of power is Sean Spicer's stupidity in that particular comment, because it shows me that White House team really hasn't done a lot of studying about the U.S. Constitution and, in fact, the culture of Washington. I'm not talking about the culture that the voters said they wanted to change. I'm talking about how things work by law, by process, by diplomacy. There's a diplomatic channel within the State Department that by culture, history, necessity puts in writing that they have problems with that the president is doing, any president. It's allowable, it's necessary, it's part of the process, and for him to suggest they ought to go packing, it's just one of those things that shows me this guy doesn't know what the heck he's talking about. Here's the thing: if the president was on his game that way, he would have sent Sean Spicer packing 3 days ago. Somewhere along the line, they're going to have to figure out that this guy is way over his head, way over his head. And whatever happened to like a calming influence from the press secretary's point of view when your boss is kind of out there? Everybody just doubles down. Kellyanne Conway doubles down. Steve Bannon triples down. Sean Spicer quadruples down. It's unnerving in a lot of ways. All right, so the Washington State Attorney General is levying lawsuit on this particular matter. Now our homegrown Attorney General in Massachusetts is doing the same, and she's loading up for that. In the meantime, just a couple of things. The Education Commissioner was preliminarily approved, even though she's got some plagiarism issues. We'll see how that whole thing goes on the full swoop. All right, we'll get back to Washington in just a second. I wanted to mention to you that our Colonel of the State Police is now formally sworn in. Here's your headline on that, and here's the coverage.
All the duties as
This is Rhode Island's new state police colonel.
So help me God. So help me God. Congratulations.
Governor Gina Raimondo swore in Anna Sumpico as the 13th colonel of the Rhode Island State Police and first female leader. The event, packed with law enforcement officers from across New England, started with bagpipes and drumming. Then after the hugs and celebratory handshakes, Colonel Sumpico told the crowd she wants to make the state police more diverse.
I look forward to new initiatives to encourage more women and minorities to apply to the state police.
She plans to increase mentoring and training of new recruits.
We've come up with a great model. We think the model is going to be so good that it will be used by other agencies.
Sumpico takes over just days after President Donald Trump has signed multiple executive orders,
Homeland Security,
one stripping federal grants from so-called sanctuary states. The governor says that does not include Rhode Island.
And I don't even know what that term means. I don't think there is such a thing.
Colonel told Eyewitness News how they handle immigration now will remain the same.
We're not going to change anything here. We're going to do like we normally do as far as we've handled it for the past few years. We haven't had any problems. It's a good system, and we're going to just keep doing what we're doing.
The thing is that, I just switched cameras on Kevin just because I wanted to see my chubby profile, I guess. The colonel doesn't react to questions about sanctuary status for the state of Rhode Island, and the governor yesterday actually wondered out loud what it actually meant. That kind of playing around is no good either. You know, honesty about definitions is something that's been lacking for the last 60 days in the later part of the campaign and in Washington itself. Look, Providence has a sanctuary flavor, no doubt, and Rhode Island has a duly sanctuary disposition. If there are criminals in the system that need to be sent to ICE, they do so, they say. Other than that, nobody's asking about status anywhere, anyhow. Now, you may be comfortable with that. I don't have a big problem with that myself personally, but we ought to be at least honest and clear about the way it goes. There's another indication that Mayor Lors is all over that as well. Alrighty. What's the latest? Well, if you're watching the show at 7:30, you don't know who it is yet. If you're watching the show at midnight, you already do. Disclosure, we record this program at 1:30 in the afternoon, and we'll see. Here's the thing that's kind of interesting about all of this. The process is going to be quite fascinating, with Democrats threatening to filibuster on whoever the nominee is. Now, Donald Trump might pick, of the three candidates that he's got, the one in the middle to see if he can avoid that. But then again, he's not shown any proclivity to walk away from a fight. Professor Jim Green is the director of the Brazil Initiative at Brown University and knows a lot about immigration, that's for sure. We met Professor Green at a radio forum a couple of months ago at Brown, enjoyed his commentary, and we welcome him back.
Well, thank you for having me.
You're certainly welcome to be here. Before we get to that stuff, the important stuff there, thought on the Supreme Court process?
This is the most important decision that will happen in the Congress this year. I think it's really going to be crucial to find the right person. I don't think that Trump is going to find a person that's going to defend human rights in this country. I'm very concerned about the results.
What human rights do you think need to be defended out of the Supreme Court?
The right of women to choose, the right of immigrants to live in this country, the rights of LGBT to maintain the victories and the rights they've obtained in the last few years. The campaign, the tone, the energy is to roll back everything that the civil rights movement won in this country in the 60s and beyond. It's very, very alarming for people.
Well, it's going to be interesting because the pro-life issue it feels so settled. I'm a pro-life guy by, I don't know, nature, trade. I don't even know how to react to it. So many years now after Roe v. Wade. I wonder if that will get its own separate battlefield. There's no doubt that the Trump administration is moving on that, but I think most of us in America, despite what strong feelings we may have on the abortion question, really don't want to see the clock wound back on these other matters.
You know, I think
you see it as a package.
I see that a year ago, none of us could have predicted anything that's happening today, and could not possibly have imagined the kind of president that we have today. And so I think anything goes. I think this president believes anything goes. He has a strong constituency that wants to see Roe v. Wade rolled back. There'll be more restrictions, making it ineffective for many women to be able to have an abortion if they so choose.
Well, remember, the Supreme Court nominee doesn't always go the way of the nominator.
That's true.
You know, so it's as far as the Democrats kind of standing down on this, we could see a nuclear option here, and that's just going to add to the contentiousness.
It's going to add to the polarization, which has existed since the beginning of the year or last year when the election campaign started. I've never seen the country more polarized, and I've lived through many different moments in this country.
All right, we'll talk about the immigration issues here in just a moment. I just want to remind you, though, that Navigant Credit Union has instituted this brand new program. You see the little card? You see that little iPhone? Yeah, with Card Valet, an app that you can use. You can see everything that you've done on your debit or credit card simply by touching the app, and it's got so many programs. You can do your personal banking right on that Card Valet application in coordination with everything you've done with your ATM card or your Visa card, MasterCard, whatever it happens to be. It really is it's not just an everyday app. I've used it. It's really cool, and it's always nice to know that wherever your pennies are going, all the information is right in your fingertips. Check out Card Valet from Navigant Credit Union. We'll be right back. All right, why don't we just kind of recap some of the local reaction to what's been going on immigration-wise. This particular story ran late last night on Eyewitness News.
Protesters take to the streets voicing opposition to President Trump's executive order temporarily banning refugees and citizens of 7 Muslim-majority countries from entering the U.S. While opponents criticize the White House for its rollout, Trump says it's all in the name of safety.
Actually had a very good day yesterday in terms of Homeland Security. And someday we had to make the move, and we decided to make the move.
The executive order was blamed for backups at airports as people were stopped from entering the states, some even sent back overseas. Senate Democrats have pledged to file a bill overturning the order, and Rhode Island's entirely Democratic congressional delegation has spoken out against it.
We should have the compassion to bring them here, just again, balancing security, but with compassion.
Trump's team has vehemently defended the executive order, even saying the list of countries included was drafted originally by President Obama.
The Obama administration put these first and foremost and said that these countries need to have further travel restrictions based on the intelligence that we have.
In regards to the comparison, Obama made his first public statement since leaving office, saying he fundamentally disagrees with the notion of discriminating against individuals because of their faith or religion.
You know, it's kind of interesting. Homeland Security Director Kelly today had an earlier briefing that production-wise we couldn't get up for you just quite in the midday. But he kind of directly answered questions as he kind of danced around how much information he actually had in order to be able to affect that order and the kind of, I don't know, you can call it chaos at the airports that ensued, at least for a temporary period of time, is not something that the Donald Trump administration needed to bring any confidence to the table.
You know, I feel like we've been captured into a reality show that we can't get out of in this country, that we have no control over. I mean, the example that you point out right now is the question, well, okay, you want to suspend immigration of refugees. What has been the problem in the last 6 months that leads us to say we need to reevaluate it? Has there been breaches? Have there been security problems? Have there been mass shootings or anything? No, there's not been any indication, there's any reason to do what we're doing other than we need to show in showman style way that we're doing what we promised to do. We can't do it legally the way we promised we would do it in the electoral campaign. We talked to Giuliani. He helps us figure out a way to legally do it, so we can do the Muslim ban that we promised we would do
By
in
the
a
way,
different way.
By the way, it's not a Muslim ban and it's not a travel ban. Today we were told it's not a travel ban and it's not a Muslim ban. I don't know what kind of ban it is, so it's not a ban.
And
it's a review. It's a 90-day review process.
It's a review, but it's not saying, well, look, we need to review the countries where people came into this country dangerously and harmed this country. We need to look at our policies for Egyptians, for Saudis, for people from Germany. What is the problem of people coming from France to the United States? It's not at all. It's showmanship. It has nothing to do with substance. It has nothing to do with change of policy. It's to appease his base, to show that he's a very forceful person, and we're suffering the consequences of that. It's extremely dangerous for the democratic rights in this country. And it's piled on to something which to me is personally offensive, because my partner is Israeli, is the Holocaust Day, when Jews are not mentioned, is an affront to all the people who died in Shoah.
They more or less tried to explain yesterday that they thought it was a given that the Jews were included in the all people reference in that thing. Others would suggest that there's actually a purposeful omission. It's a very hard thing to figure out.
There are people close to the president who are Holocaust deniers, who support Holocaust deniers. This is a kind of a light way to ignore it. It's like saying the Civil War was not about slavery; it was about cotton production in the South. It denies the essence of the question at hand, and the mass systematic elimination of Jews and Gypsies and some homosexuals, but Jews primarily, is something that cannot be
What's hard
denied.
to figure out if it's a misstep or it's purposeful, and depending on who you speak to, and who you learn from, it's hard. I mean, it's also hard to figure out if this execution of the thing that happened in airports this weekend was purposeful or whether it was just sloppy. It's hard to figure out.
Well, it's clearly purposeful because it was implemented, but it's sloppy at the same time.
No, I'm talking about the execution, whether the way it went is that the way they really wanted to go, or did they write a press release which really was an executive order in disguise, or vice versa, and just let the details caution to the wind? I don't know.
The way this president works, he hears something on TV, he reacts immediately. He hears that there's a problem with voter, that Mara Liasson and National Public Radio questions whether there's any proof for voter fraud, and the next day he's announcing a national investigation of this thing with no basis for that at all. He's a reactive person who thinks by the minute, and he's endangering people. And as a professor at Brown University, this is extremely alarming because we have graduate students, undergraduate students, faculty who have been in danger and are not able to even come back into the country.
There's a few people on the couch right now who are just throwing tomatoes at the screen saying, York brought on another lefty from Brown.
I would consider myself a person that cares about this country profoundly. My mother's family came here in 1634 and lived in the Fairbanks House in Dedham, Massachusetts. My father's family came in the 17th century, the 18th century as Quakers. I love this country profoundly, and I love the fact that this country is a democratic one, open to all people. Immigrants from Europe, from Latin America, from the rest of the world. That's what makes this country great.
You have an expertise on some of the immigration stuff, and when we come back, we'll list what the non-ban ban is, so you see whatever it is he did, we'll tell you what it contains. Let's be right back. Welcome back in. Professor Green knows a little bit about the immigration thing. Let me just put on the, I don't mean to be so cavalier, by the way, when it comes to the immigration thing, but all right, we call it the immigration ban. I don't know. We don't even know what to call it. The visitors, students, workers barred, new immigrants barred, refugees barred, green holders are case by case. We're barred for a second there, and now it's case by case, and diplomats and other officials are allowed if you can discern between who's who and who's what. Overall, your reaction, I'm sure, is not very positive with these 7 countries.
It's very harmful in many ways. It's harmful for academic freedom in this country, the ability for scholars from other countries who have were citizens of Iran or Iraq who might be here in the United States is being prevented from this temporary ban. We have a school year in session. There are people cannot come back and teach classes or take classes because of this ban, with no basis of this.
How many faculty are affected, do you know?
I've been asked not to mention the details because we're dealing with very sensitive situations, and hopefully we're going to be able to get some of the people to come in. There's disputes about who really is a part of the ban and who's not a part of the ban because the implementation has been irregular.
I would think that faculty at a high-level institution like Brown that issue probably has a faster track via the State Department for reconciliation.
I would say that the people who arrived in the airport on Saturday and Sunday did not sign that. There are people who are waiting to come in and are very concerned because once they're denied, they won't be able to come in for 5 years. And so there's a very serious problem that people are facing. That's one element.
They're they're terrorist-involved countries. We have to make good on a promise to do a review.
We should do it, and the question is, it's being done. It has been done. It takes a long period of time, and no one is saying these are the examples of when vetting was not successful recently. These are the holes in the system. These are the ways in which our bureaucracy is inadequate in what it's doing. Therefore, we need to review this and come up with a new solution. That's not being presented at all. There's no argumentation being made that the system is broke. So why do we need to fix it?
Well, we're going from vetting to extreme vetting. Unfortunately, not a lot of people know the difference between the two.
That's discourse. It's just blah, blah, blah that the Trump administration is talking about. The vetting is, and what does that mean that you're doing? I mean, if it would be made clear to American people, they would perhaps understand more. The other part of this, which is very serious, in addition to the idea that you ask for allies in Iraq to join U.S. forces there as translators and then do not do anything to allow them to become refugees when they might be in danger in their own countries, which is just inhumane in a very profound way. You really reinforce all of the discourse of the radical jihadists in the Arab world about what the United States' intentions are. It reinforces that anger, it reinforces that insecurity, it reinforces that among people in this country.
Now, your expertise is clearly you've got some thoughts on the worldview, but you've got a specific expertise in Brazil. Well, just tell me about that perspective. Not that Brazil is key to this conversation, but it's another free country that has a lot of relationship with us.
So there are two levels I can speak. I teach Latin American history. I've traveled extensively throughout Latin America. I know the area really well, and I actually do have some expertise in the Middle East because I teach at Hebrew University in Jerusalem every year a course. But more specifically for Latin America, the worst situation right now that we face is that all of the countries and the people in all the countries are incredibly worried about this president. They think that he is a madman in power, that is irrationally in charge of the most powerful country in the world. First of all, they're incredulous because it wasn't possible that he could possibly get elected. Now he's doing what he's doing. They don't believe that. They're very, very worried about the situation. And at the same time, people are very enheartened by the kinds of mobilizations that have occurred in this country since then. I participated in the civil rights movement as a young person in the 60s and the anti-war movement. I've never seen this kind of immediate and massive mobilization throughout the country. It's everywhere. It's not organized centrally. It's spontaneous in a lot of ways.
Organic
it's coherent.
in nature.
Very much so. And I think it's going to be ongoing. And I think that this president is going to be facing this, not just from immigrants and people who support immigrant rights and refugee rights, but people who have all the questions that Trump is trying to overturn in this society. And he did not win a majority. And, you know, there are a majority of people who are not happy with him.
Well, he would have if it wasn't voter fraud. Don't you know that?
Right.
Good to hear from you. Thank you.
It's been a pleasure.
I hope you come back.
I would love to.
Final word when we come back. Stay with us. Tomorrow night we will have local leaders of the Muslim community in here to react, and obviously they're not going to be too happy either. But again, I stress, if you feel like Donald Trump has been short-shrifted on this program, it's not that I have a guilty conscience, it's that I'm in desperate search for those who see it a different way. It may lead to this summation, which is that most reasonable people don't understand what in the heck is going on right now outside or inside the White House and how it's affecting all of us. But it's a day-to-day thing, and when he does something smart, I promise you I'll be the first one to say, hey, that was smart. Tom Brady's getting loose. Don't forget. What did he tell you yesterday, Kev? Hydrate? Hydrate. What do you hydrate before the game?
Every game.
That's because those tall ones require hydration, not because you're breaking any sweat anywhere. We'll see you on the radio at 3 tomorrow on WPRO. Back here tomorrow night. Good night.